Hey folks, this is Vint with Dan's Gaming Addiction, and once again we're going to check out Heroes of Hammerwatch 2. We'll be checking out the Sorcerer today, and like my other guide videos, this is not a catch-all, you must play this way to win kind of videos. No, I'm going to show you how I typically handle my Sorcerer, and if you happen to get some useful information out of that, great, but I encourage you to try out different things and see what works best for you. Weapons, real quick, typically you're going to have a choice between staff or a one-hand wand with an offhand tome. I personally like the wand with the offhand tome simply because you can enchant two things as opposed to one. I briefly touched on this in my wizard video, and just to show you that real quick again, here's a wand, and as you can see, it's got the powerful enchant on it, and that gives me plus 54 spell power. And I've got a tome here that's also powerful, and it's plus 58 spell power. Now the staff down here is a two-handed staff, and that is also a powerful staff, and that gives me plus 54 spell power. So that plus 54 spell power is the same as the one-handed one's plus 54 spell power. Powerful tag, powerful tag. So with a two-handed weapon, there's no increase to the amount of spell power you get whenever you enchant it with that powerful tag. So for that reason, I mean, you use what you want, but, you know, with two items, I get more spell power out of two different things attached to myself as opposed to one two-handed weapon. But again, it's whatever you prefer. I recommend possibly sticking with whatever specialization you're going with. For example, you know, if you're going to go electric spec, then choose electric weapons. If you're going to go with the fire spec, choose fire weapons, and so on. Attributes, I think this one's going to be fairly easy. Intelligence is going to be your driving force, I think, with some vitality. Vitality is important because only one of the three specs have some kind of self-healing, as far as I've seen, and that's the fire spec. So if you're playing as electric spec or the frost/ice spec, then you're going to be struggling to stay alive. So having extra vitality and health regen is going to help you do that. So you definitely want some vitality. Don't neglect that. But in this particular build, I'm a fire spec, so I can afford a little less vitality because I am going to be getting that self-heal back through one of my fire spells, which I'll show you in a little bit. But I would also recommend a little bit of focus. The idea here is that if you're going to be spamming discharge, which is one of your primary skills, again, we'll touch on that later, you may need some more mana. But typically, for me anyway, I focus on my active ability, which does have a decent cooldown, 10, 15, 20 seconds. So I don't typically hurt for mana as the Sorcerer, but again, if you're going to discharge your primary abilities like discharge, then you may want to throw some points into focus as well. But again, primarily intelligence is where it's at because it's going to give you your spell power as well as spell crit chance and spell crit damage, all of which are super important for the Sorcerer. Enchanting, keep in mind that my gear is not 100% enchanted because I've got 7 different characters, and even with the most recent patch, you know, earning enchanting materials is still, you know, somewhat of a grind, and I'm not always able to do that. So the ones I would recommend, the powerful tag is good. The powerful tag just gives you flat out spell power. If you can find one that gives you, I think it's keen, that gives you intelligence. Again, not all gear have the same available enchants. Like keen is available on the hat, which is nice, but it's not available on certain other pieces of gear. Keen is going to give you intelligence, and as we just saw, intelligence is good for spell power and crit chance and all that good stuff. So if you have a choice between powerful or keen, you know, it's up to you. I mean, keen will give you more spell power, crit, and crit is good for a sorcerer. So don't neglect your crit because some of your active abilities involve getting crit and increasing crit damage. So crit is a big thing for the Sorcerer. But anyway, I would recommend powerful or keen if you can do that. If you're having issues with staying alive, stout is another good one. So powerful, keen, stout, these are all ideal ones to choose, and maybe a combination of them would be good to have. And also, you're gonna maybe adopt maybe say Blizzard or Tempest. It all depends on whether or not you want to do extra damage with a particular element or not. If you're going to go fire spec, then you may want to do Hellfire, which is going to give you plus 17% damage for that particular enchant. Tempest and Blizzard, again, it all depends if you choose electric, the ice, or the fire spec. So if you are interested in doing extra damage in a particular spec type, then you may want to look into those as well, but typically staying alive is more important than anything else, so Stout is probably the best way to go with throwing enchants into Keen or Powerful. Your blue words, again, this will change depending on the different pieces of equipment that you have. Sundering is always good if you can find ones that give like penetration to a particular element type. That's also good too. I like the of learning because I'm constantly trying to level up my characters and save myself time. But that's just me. And of course, there is a cape one and a couple of other ones of protection, which just flat out, reduces damage taken. So if anything, I would recommend the of learning and the of protection tags. But again, you do you. As far as attuning trinkets are concerned, I would recommend, like I always do, spell power is going to be a big one. Crit is also big for the Sorcerer. In fact, one of their primary skills is a passive that involves crit. So finding ways to expand upon that is always good. Because the Sorcerer is more of a squishy class and only one of the 3 specs has any sort of self-healing, I would also recommend throwing points into anything that will allow you to regenerate more health or give you more health. That way you can stay alive a little bit easier. Okay, so magic shop / upgrade priorities here. Again, your opinions are going to vary from mine. A lot of people swear by Scorching Rays, which is it changes your discharge ability to a fire spell and they now pierce targets. That's good. But, and I have to stress this, but if you are the fire spec, it sounds like a huge, great idea to change this to fire because, hey, the fire spec gives me more damage and now it's a fire tag. Yes, more damage and pierce. Yes, yes, yes. Okay, fine. What if you also change your magic weapon, which we'll see in a minute? What if you change that in your fire spec to fire as well? So now you've got a fire staff, you've got fire scorching rays, you've got, instead of your discharge, you've got, say, the elemental orb. Let's say you adaptive orb. If you have elemental affinity when casting the spell, the orb will only deal damage of the corresponding element. So instead of it doing this orb doing damage of all element types, it's doing just fire damage. So now you've got fire, 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 fire. And in theory, like I said, that's great because your fire spec gives you bonus to fire damage. Now what happens if you come across an enemy with fire resistance? Now what? So now your one-trick pony isn't as effective, and it's a pain in the butt. Those orbs, those wisps in the last stage, the yellow ones are going to be resistant to fire, and it takes forever to kill them. That's annoying. So I still recommend Scorching Rays, long story short. However, you need to make sure that one of your magic dealing damage spells remains a different element, whether it's ice or electric, whatever. That way you can deal with enemies that are particularly resistant to a type. If you do all fire, you're opening yourself up to an enemy now that resists fire. So this is okay, the Scorching Rays, it's great. Don't get me wrong, it's great. But if you change this, then maybe don't go with Adaptive Orb, which, again, it goes from a multi-element attack to a specific element attack. So I would not do both. I would do one or the other. That way one of your spells remains different from everything else for the purpose of killing elemental resistant enemies, if that makes any sense. So just be smart about it. Don't convert all of your spells to one type of element, is what I'm saying. These are great. Rays of Frost, Scorching Rays, Adaptive Orb. Just be careful that you're not changing them all to one type, because that's bad. Uncontrolled power. You deal increased spell crit damage, yes. Just yes. I mean, like I said, you've got a passive already that increases your spell crit chance and the like. So having this extra, that's huge. I mean, that's a no-brainer. You're going to want as much damage because there's also a fire spell that will kick in and give you health if you do crit damage. So this, I mean, it's just crit all around is good for the Sorcerer. So that's huge. Power Surge, I don't care too much about, but that's up to you. Mana Surge, on the other hand, is a good one. If you're going to be spamming Discharge or whatever you convert your Discharge to, you're going to need mana. So if you're going to be spamming that first skill, then you're going to want mana. So having as many percentage points into this, I mean, 1.5% in theory is enough if you're just going to do active abilities, but if you're going to be spamming stuff, then yes, you're going to want 5% mana surge, unless you're lucky enough to find a trinket. I recommend both Elemental Ward and Elemental Penetration. Anything that gives you extra damage penetration of a particular element type or resistance is good, considering that the higher NGs really penalize you in that regard. I'm not going to get into the specific spec stuffs here. We'll be talking about those a little later. Tavern drinks. I'm not saying you should take these. I'm just saying consider them. Impetuous Apprentice. The whole spell cooldown thing, the more you can cast your spells, the more DPS you do, but it is a mana concern. So if you're worried about mana, this is... If you don't mind waiting a few extra seconds to cast your spell again, then maybe don't take this, but I still recommend it if you've got your mana under control. Same thing with the Ambitious Adept. So more crit chance is good. More crit chance. Again, the Sorcerer thrives on crit chance. Spell crit chance. So I highly recommend this one, definitely. And then lastly, the Shocking Zinger, or one of the elemental counterparts to that. If you're taking the lightning spec, then Shocking Zinger makes sense because it just does more lightning damage. Chilly Fingers, if you're taking the ice spec, you're going to do more ice damage. And if you're taking the fire spec, you're going to do more fire damage. So I would choose one of these three depending on what spec you ultimately go with. Like the wizard, you're going to be spending most of your time casting spells, and yes, it's nice to have a little bit of DPS with wands or stabs, but I would do this last. Wands, tomes, stabs, whichever you prefer. You can throw points in here if you have nothing else to spend your points on. I would do this last. Your spells are going to be your heavy hitters. Do those first. Titles. We've done this in a separate video already, but just to cover it here again to be complete about it. The Sorcerer title grants 0.1 mana regeneration per level. So at level 40, I'm getting 4 mana regeneration given to all of my other characters. And don't overlook that. It's not as big as some other trinkets give you. That being said, it is important because there are some mana-hungry characters out there that will blow through mana very quickly. So don't neglect the Sorcerer. It's an easy way of getting some free mana regen for all of your characters. Let's touch on some basic skills that the Sorcerer has. Again, we'll talk about specs in a little bit. Discharge. This is your cone lightning that you start off with. Again, this can be respect into a fire or frost attack via those purple orb upgrades. Whether you do that is up to you, but like I said, you need to be careful about not putting all of your eggs in one basket, making everything fire, making everything frost, electric, whatever. You just got to be super careful about that for the sake of enemies that might be resistant to a particular element type. Elemental Orb, it's one I liked in the beginning, and it's not bad. It does damage of all elements to nearby enemies, but it's extremely skill-based, I think, to use. If you're trying to, let's take an enemy that doesn't move. You shoot it out, and it slows to a stop, and you kind of have to launch it just at the right length in order to get it to stop right next to a non-moving target. Like Arista, for example, if you shoot it too early, or if you're too close, the orb bounces off Arista, and then it no longer does damage as it goes away from it. So, it takes a little bit of skill for this orb to use. Now, there are upgrades to make it shoot out shards and the like, but I use this only when I'm facing enemies that are resistant to a particular element type. It's also my oh crap button. I need to do some extra damage. It's not bad in hallways, but at the higher NG levels, I've dropped Elemental Orb and only use it when I absolutely need to. Innate Power grants spell crit chance. This is what I was saying earlier about this class having a passive starter ability that gives you spell crit chance. So any way you can to compound on that, you're going to be doing well. So make sure your intelligence is up there to increase your crit chance, crit damage. Find trinkets that are going to increase your spell crit chance and spell crit damage. And again, other abilities will sort of chain with this. So you're going to want to max this out for sure. Elemental Affinity. This is a passive. I recommend increasing this to its max simply because 30% extra damage is good. When casting a spell, you gain elemental affinity of the same element as the spell you cast. You deal more damage of the corresponding element as long as you have elemental affinity. So if you cast a lightning spell, you are now going to have affinity of lightning. So now when you cast lightning again in the future, while this is up, you're going to do more lightning damage. That's what it's saying. And there's even that orb upgrade that changes the orb from like a multi-element to a one-element type. So if you do that orb upgrade, if you cast the discharge, and now your elemental affinity is lightning, and then you cast the orb, or the elemental orb, and make that all lightning, it's going to do a crap ton of lightning damage with that particular upgrade. But, like I said, it's putting all your eggs in one basket, and lightning-resistant enemies are not going to take as much damage. So you got to be super careful with this, but I still recommend maxing this out. This, it's up to you. I have a couple of points in there, but not everything. And then Discharge, I have that maxed out as well. Specializations, I'm going to keep this real brief because I'm going to be saying the same thing about most of them. So here's the thing. The Fire specialization is going to give you Fire Mastery, so more damage to fire spells with a chance of weakness. The Ice is going to give you a passive Ice extra damage, so extra damage using Ice skills. There's a 10% chance of inflicting freezing, and then Lightning will give you a Lightning Mastery, which is an extra, 10 to 50% damage, 10% chance to inflict stun. So it all depends on what spec you like. I did my NG pushing with Lightning for the longest time until I started realizing that my damage against bosses, it was just awful. Lightning is fun because you've got this Lightning Ball, which is this ability here. And if you take the ability called Energized Ball, which extends the length of this for every enemy it hits, you can clear out entire hallways. It is comical and fun. It is so fun. But here's the thing. Against bosses, this thing takes a while to recharge, and it's not as good as at single target. So, and the lightning specialization doesn't have a self-heal. So when in a party, and you can play a support role with the lightning in the sense that you can clear hallways and do a crap ton of damage that way. But against bosses, you're going to be relying on other characters that are more like the rogue that can blow things up a lot quicker. So lightning, I would recommend if you're in a party and you want to clear hallways quickly, or if you're on an XP run or a resource run and have no intention of NG pushing, lightning, I think, is the way to go. Fire is the only one that does have that self-heal. Again, as far as I can tell, I don't have everything memorized, but there's an ability called Healing Flames, and that will give you a heal, for your crits and the like. So the more you increase your crit chance and your crit damage, the better off you'll be, like I said, and having that extra crit chance is going to keep you healed. So you're going to want to NG push with this fire spec. It's really the only one that can sustain itself, in my opinion. And on top of that, there is an ability that you'll get. It's an orb upgrade where you can dash and leave fire behind you. It's just fire on it. It acts just like the flame wall does, which the flame wall leaves fire on the ground. And there's even ability with that, so where you can pinpoint where you put it. That's really good, but dashing and leaving the same kind of fire behind does a crap ton of damage, and it can heal. This fire spec is the way to NG push. That's what I'm saying. Fire, if you're going to NG push, fire is the way to go. It has a lot of great damage and a self-heal to boot. So if you can find the healing flames is a must. You must start with that, I think. The Flame Walker is nice as well. The Flame Walker is an ability where if you walk in a fire spell, it gives you this fire aura and consistently does damage around you. That's okay, but it's not as important as the healing ability. Ice, on the other hand, I enjoy this one the least. Maybe there are people out there that like this, but my issue with Frost Nova, which is its active ability, is it unleashes damage shards in all directions. You kind of have to like dash into the middle of a group of enemies and then cast this to get the most out of it. Because if you cast it with a bunch of enemies in front of you, all those shards go behind you, and only a couple will hit the enemies in front of you, so it's like, it's not as effective. So you want to get in the middle of things, but that's not my playstyle as a sorcerer slash caster. I want to blow things up from a distance, not jump in the middle of everything. And on top of that, this is more risky, jumping into things, because yeah, there are skills that like, oh, now my shards break apart, Frost Seekers and Splinters, whatever. That's great AoE damage. Fine. But now you're putting yourself at risk for curse. So, it's unnecessary. So I don't like the ice. Maybe some of you will enjoy ice. I don't. And ice doesn't have a whole lot of way of healing. There is ice block for the ice spec, which there's a chance to block physical and ice damage, but that doesn't apply to fire or electric or other things, so or poison. So you just gotta be wary that there is a couple of skills to help you out with ice, but it's not going to protect you against everything. So all in all, if you're going to NG push, go fire. If you just want to have some fun, lightning and ice, I don't know what to tell you. I never use it, really. I don't like it. And there you go. Hopefully you found this enjoyable, helpful. If you guys haven't already, please subscribe and share my channel. I can't stress that enough. The more views I get, the more likely it is that I'll do more videos in the future. But if you want to see more of these Heroes of Hammerwatch 2 videos, then I need to see the view count. I need to see the support. I'm not going to just release these videos and then only 10 people see it. So keep watching, keep sharing. Show your friends, Steam forums, I don't care. Just share. Share, please. This is Vince. Thanks for watching. Catch y'all next time. Take care.